Give it to you now. Okay, so we have here today Tahir Abdel-Ghani, and Tahir is an architect and urban researcher, a lecturer, and an independent filmmaker. He is a lecturer at the Modern Science and Art University in Cairo. Um, his research mainly focuses on analyzing the urban environment through cinematic images, an idea that started in 2012 when he completed his bachelor's degree in architecture. So without wasting much time, I'll hand over to Tahir, and then we'll take it from there. We don't have any kind of program in terms of in order when we present at what time, so we'll just go with the flow. And then, so we'll start now, we'll take a break at 12:30, and then we'll 12:30 to 1:30 is our lunch time, and then we come back again to continue. So over to you, Tahir. Thank you so much for accepting the invitation, and we're looking forward to an exciting time with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dixon, for the introduction and for inviting me here. And yeah, I would like to thank the Graduate School of Architecture at Johannesburg for inviting me to give a lecture to like share a little bit of my knowledge and my expertise in to the students. I can start sharing the presentation. I can. Okay, can you see it, everybody?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I will start with a self-introduction, a little bit on of myself. I am an architect, or actually used to be an architect because I stopped practicing architecture 3 years ago, or almost 4 years ago now. But I used to be a practicing architect. I used to work in offices from independent offices to commercial offices, and I worked in heritage and design and technical offices as well. I'm also an urban researcher. I research on cities, on societies, on also on cinematic urbanism. And I started to merge this idea of cinematic urbanism with other fields like sociology, like education also. So now I'm trying to see how this can benefit students as well. I'm also a lecturer at, like Dixon said, I'm at the Modern Sciences and Arts University in Cairo. Yes, this is my job that I make the students cry. Well, no, I'm joking. I don't do that. Well, usually I do that, but not much. But yeah, my main job, I can say, is that I want to push students to do their very best and to try to come up with every possible ideas to completion and to sort of like perfection or less than perfection a bit. And finally, I'm a filmmaker, an independent filmmaker, and I do like short movies, short experimental movies about cities. And I have displayed some of my films were exhibited in Europe and like in France, in Portugal, in England, in USA, also outside of Europe. So, and I've won a couple of awards for my movies. So, yeah, my career is mostly between research and publications, and also the filmmaking practices. So today I want to talk to you about the idea of fractals, what's fractal cinematic narratives of urban space. And for that, I want to start first with a movie. It's called Magnolia. It was done in 2000, yes, Magnolia. And I want to explain the first 6 minutes in the movie. So the first 6 minutes starts with a suicide attempt. The guy in front of you, he's about to attempt suicide, and he throws himself from the roof of the building. And as he falls, there is a quarrel, like a fight between his parents, just 3 floors under, and his mother grabs a shotgun and she fires a bullet through the window. The bullet goes through the window into his body, and then he lands on a safety net. So the idea that if if there was no argument, like if there was no bullet, he would have landed safely. He wouldn't have died actually, uh, because he landed on a safety net had he had not taken the bullet in the first place. So this incident, this small incident, led to the appearance of several characters. Like you can see, these are the characters of the movie. Several characters that go about each other. They go crossing each other. Their lives cross each other by chance and by spontaneity. Like there's nothing planned. No one planned their stories to come together. And this can be described as social microcosm. The social microcosm is a sort of an urban form where the elements are collided by chance and by fate. So you don't determine something. You don't have control over what comes next, over the sequence of events. It just happens spontaneous. So on one level, it could be like this diagram that you see in front of you. This is a diagram or a book by Jacques Monod. He was a French biologist, and his book Chance and Necessity, he describes the life as the result of natural processes by pure chance. And in his book he clarifies the behavior of systems in biology, in modern biology. So he says that the cells interact together in a spontaneous manner. And on the urban level, we go by with the term "what if," the "what if" narrative. What if I cross the street and I meet someone I don't know, and this somebody turns out to be someone linked to someone that I know, and he brings me to a certain event, and that event brings me to something else. So one sequence of events goes to the next, and one sequence, and they build up undeterminedly, like very spontaneous, very flexible. And so this notion of connectivity and chance have become the main devices for storytelling. So now the spontaneous matter has become more stronger than the pre-planned or the predetermined aspect. So if we want to trace a bit the origins of this approach, we can go back to the 19th century Western philosophy, and we have French scientist Marquis de Laplace, and his work, it was based on scientific determinism, and his work, like the scientific determinism, is basically about how science can determine the different like processes that happens in the universe. And his work was cited in Stephen Hawking's book, which is The Universal in a Nutshell. And he said that if we are able to determine the positions and velocities of all the particles in the universe at one time, then we would predict the state of the universe at any other time, whether it's in the past or the future. So if we have one element, we can determine the next element. And he illustrated this with a very simple diagram of children who are, of a boy who's tossing a ball. Like you can see the position and the velocity. And so if you know these two determinants, you will know where the ball will land. So this continued to dominate science until the 1960s, when meteorologist Edward Lawrence, he was running some tests on weather model, on climate, and he made some small changes, and these small changes produced large changes in the long-term outcome. So he made some changes in the input, but then the output brought much bigger changes than what he thought. And this is what is called as the butterfly effect. And I guess you all know the term butterfly effect. Is that when if the butterfly flaps its wings in one part of the world, then it causes a tornado in some other part of the world. And a good example of this is a very famous French film called Amélie. You also heard of Amélie, right? I guess you all heard of it or seen it. It's a French movie done in 2001, and it's about this young girl who walks around the city or like travels in the city in different parts of Paris to do good, to cause good, like to help people and to make them happy and satisfied. And how did this happen? At the beginning of the movie, if you go in the beginning of the movie, it started with on August 30th in 1997, when the news of Diana's death was announced, and she was shocked, and her shock caused the cap of her perfume to drop on the ground, and then it rolled over towards this small brick on the left. You see this small brick to like cause a little crack. So when she removed this brick, she found a little small box inside, and she opened it, and she found out that there's a sort of a treasure that someone around 40 years ago, who was living in the same apartment as hers, he left this box of treasures. And then she decided that wherever this guy was, she would find him, she would find the box's owner, and she would give it to him. And so this is the result of the movie, is that you can see her trails around Paris, all these places, nodes. She passes by different characters with different stories, unrelated completely. Each story is different from the other. And the movie is actually a portrayal of the contemporary Parisian life. It portrays the fragments of the city and the interweave of on multiple scales. So it's not like it has a start and an end like a traditional way of telling the movie. It's like having no start and no end. And this is actually what is meant by the fractals. The fractals, or the fractal narratives, the fractals are infinite, and they are repeating themselves, and they are endless. And you can go inside of a narrative, from one narrative to the next. You can go from one scale to the next, to the third, to the fourth, without an ending product, without a certain conclusion. You keep on moving from, like in an abstract manner. And what does that tell us? It tells us that cities, they behave in the same way. They are no longer comprehended in the traditional classical methodologies. And to tell the story of a city it's quite challenging. And one scientist actually also put it in the same way. The scientist's name is Philip Anderson, and he said that science can give description to the individual traits of an atom. So if you have one atom, a science can give you the traits of the characteristics of this atom. But if you throw a bunch of atoms together, it becomes a completely different story. The traits are not the same anymore. So it's exactly the same thing with cities. Cities now, if you can explain each element of the city alone. You can explain the street alone, the lampposts alone, the cars alone, the trees alone. But if you put them all together, it's a completely different story. The identity, the social organization, the economic and political organizations, they give you a completely different meaning than the meaning of each element studied individually. So it's clearly that it's an understudied part, and it's especially within the narrative and the visual narrative aspect of the city. It's a part that we don't really study that much. And we as humans, we always seek meaning through connections. Like we try to simplify our status in this city. We try to see, okay, where do I fit in this environment? So it's basically about connectivity. It's basically about the connections that you draw yourself. You connect yourself to the buildings, to home, to your work, to people, to the public spaces, to the leisure places that you use. But we tend to ignore the little details, the little in-between details, these details that liberate itself from the grids. So we don't follow a grid. We don't follow a pre-assumed grid like Le Corbusier, who emphasized this. No, it's almost like you see, it's a quite chaotic, flexible, organic kind of grid. And I would like to refer to one author. He's a Greek mathematician and an architectural and urban theorist. He used his science of mathematics in architecture. His name is Nikos Talengaros. He's Greek. And he was talking about the connections in cities. And he said that for a city to have a thriving connection, a successful connection, you have to have two conditions. The first condition is that two nodes. The first condition on the left is that you have two nodes. They carry different functional characteristics, so they have to complement each other. And so the information, there's sort of information exchange. The second one is that you have the node's behavior is a catalyst to spur interactions. So the two nodes have to be placed in a way with certain distances and with certain complexity and with certain composition in order the information to flow, and so for the nodes to interact together. So it's not a simple analysis, it's more of like a very complicated analysis. One person and one very famous architect who worked with this idea of fractals in his work, his name is Bernard Tschumi, and he has a very famous, great book called The Manhattan Transcripts, and I suggest that everybody looks for this book and start to read it and start to see the illustrations in this book. Bernard Tschumi, he follows the idea of abstraction, that spaces are quite abstract, like they do not start from somewhere and end somewhere. Our experience inside space is very fluid and very spontaneous also. And he follows a very not formal or like a non-conventional way of approach in his ideas, in his project. So his project is mainly built upon movement, the human movement. One illustration in his book, he starts with this one. This is a human body falling from a tower. And you can see the sequence. You see that the body falls in a sequence manner. The body position changes very spontaneous manner also. And so every frame he transforms this frame into lines, and then he connects these lines together in a way. And then each line, he starts to design this line into a sort of like masses, different masses together. And then in the end, he starts connecting these masses with a sort of an axe going going through the mass itself. So you can see like this whole mass this long, very long mass. It started with a sequence of events, a sequence of frames, that started with the human body falling from the tower. So his idea of experiencing space is built on experiencing movement, your movement inside the space. And he actually was inspired by film also. He was inspired by a Soviet filmmaker called Sergei Eisenstein, who was very famous in the 1920s and 30s. He was part of the Soviet montage movement, because the Soviets actually were considered like the godfathers and the creators of the editing technique in cinema, and they had several techniques. So Sergei Eisenstein, this is one of his movies. It's called Alexander Nevsky. It was in the 1927, I think, and this is like the origins of Chumi's inspiration. So you have a scenery, which is divided into a sequence of frames. This is the images, and then you have the musical score underneath, and then you have the duration of each frame, which is also like can be 1 minute, like 1 second or 3/4 of a second, and so on. And then you have the image itself, or the patterns, which is sort of like the storyboard of this sequence. And then the movement gesture, which he illustrated through the lines, as you can see with the bars, and the bar number. So he's like breaking down the scenery into layers. And it's the same, more or less, how Bernard Tschumi works. It's sort of like a manifestation of the human acts, of the human movement. And so, yeah, so this is the Tschumi's model. You have, we can start, like it starts from down. You have the event, which is the human movement at the very bottom, and then the movement itself of the human body, illustrated in lines, and then the object itself, or the building, being translated from the human body in the end. And this is like the montage theory, sort of a comparison between the two, and the similarities in the techniques of how these two work together. And so, yeah, I come to the end of my presentation. Before I complete, I want to suggest a movie night, which is the Hong Kong movie Chungking Express. I would love if you can watch this movie, and maybe we can, for next week, we can discuss it. It would be nice, because this movie has a lot of this spontaneity and fractal narratives also, and the idea of unplanned, interweaved stories told in a fragmented manner. So I think you can find it. I'm not, if you cannot find it online, I can send you a link. But do watch it, and we can discuss it for next week. It's not the end. For now, it's just to be continued, because for next time we can discuss more on the movie, and then I can give also, next week I can give also another lecture about one form of fractalism and spaces and all of that. And so for now, I would like to like hear your comments or questions or thoughts and ideas, and because this is what I want, I would like to see in your ideas, in your work, and in this workshop for today. It would be nice to see what kind of ideas you have, and what kind of input and intellectual ideas and interpretation that you can come up with the idea of fractals in your thesis, in your work, and whatever. So thank you so much, Dixon, again, and yeah, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Tahir. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Awesome, great. Such a interesting and insightful lecture. I think it really kind of set the tone and understanding of what fractals, when we talk about the idea of complexity, the idea of continuity, what it means, kind of looking at architecture from that perspective. For me, I think what is quite interesting is this idea of not knowing where something leads you to, and how do you create narratives from that? Because it's almost like in architecture school, there's a rigid way of doing things. So you start from the side and you have specific things that you're looking for when you're doing your mapping, and then from your side, then you go to kind of looking at other things. But what if the reverse is what we're thinking about? What if something on the side triggers your interest, and then you begin to find other things, which I think is quite an interesting kind of research. And I think Plum really kind of give us an insight to how this can be done or how we can explore this. So I am quite excited and looking forward to see. I've also not seen what the students have done. And it was intentional that I didn't give like a feedback or a crate on it, so that it becomes more of like a workshop that we both of us almost also see this as part of spontaneous way of giving feedback, that there's no kind of a pre-judge kind of feedback on what I will give to the students. So maybe before we start the presentation, some questions from the students from about this lecture, or some comments that the students have. If you can come closer to this laptop. So.
Okay.
Okay. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Can you please go back to your slides, but then like 3 slides back?
Okay. This one?
Yes, that one. So you spoke about the whole idea of everything and everything, but can you please just elaborate how the object, the building, the movement, and the events, just more about how we as students can actually like do it. I don't know if my question makes sense.
Like you want to know how he came up with the objects in the end?
Yes.
Okay, so it's actually a quite complicated process in what his ideas, Bernard Tschumi's ideas, because he believes that space is considered of like two parts. It's what you perceive and how you experience the space. So it's like the physical experience and the like, how do you say it, like the intellectual experience or the mental experience of space. And so he's trying to combine these two together. And so in order for this to happen, you need an event and you need something to happen inside, a sort of people talking, people running, walking around, someone falling, someone doing whatever. So his idea of spontaneity is that if I take the spontaneous manner of human movement, and then I can try to, for example, this person number one here, he is this is a man walking or running in the park, and then he takes this angle of the body, and then he translates it into this line, dotted line, as you can see, as the movement part, and then he starts to take this sort of as an axe. So it's like a sort of a guiding line to the masses that he wants to put. And so he starts to put the masses in a very experimental, abstract way of how this axe can generate the masses around this sort of axe. Like, for example, this one also the same. So you can find the person with a rope here, and he's like walking on this rope, and he draws also this rope into this angle, the dotted line, and then you can have up there the sort of a bridge or like a pathway from one building to the next, sort of a connection between two objects, and the same methodology that happens in the other two. So it's basically about how a person, like you put yourself as an architect, as how you are physically experiencing the space, but also at the same time you have the other complicated level, which is how your mental or how your brains are perceiving the space. And it becomes quite intriguing to explore this sort of connectivity and these two layers between these two layers. And yeah, also I can show you next week. I can show you some more examples of how he made this made his ideas come to life. And you can look at Parc de la Villette. This is like very famous. This is one of his very famous projects. He more or less followed this methodology. And also look at his book, The Manhattan Transcripts. It's a very interesting book for architects. I really recommend it. I highly recommend it.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, I think we will move right